everything set up and ready to go. Testing out the audio real quick, making sure everything is working properly. Let me go ahead and get everything up and ready. DLive sounds good. Hit refresh on Rumble. Go in there and see what everything sounds like. Okay, Rumble sounds good. X is up and running. While it's getting ready, I'll go check Twitch out. Twitch sounds good. I have to hit refresh on X is what it is. Come in and check out Kick. Sounds good. And let me find out what's going on here on YouTube. It should be, I have to hit refresh on that too by the looks of it. I think yesterday I also had to refresh it. I'm not quite sure, but yeah, it looks like it's up and going. But now I have to go into the live stream and check the audio, see what it sounds like. It's supposed to be running from what it looks like. Okay, yeah. Okay, so it sounds good on YouTube. Now I'll find out X, see what it looks or sounds like. Have to hit refresh on it again. I mean, it shows it on the deck, so I know that it's actually running. I just don't know what the audio sounds like. Okay, there we go. Okay, so it sounds good too. Okay, so everything is up and running. We've got a background set up and good to go. Um, got the banners running for Conspiracy. Today is going to be an episode of Conspiracy. I even have my little avatar down there so that I can get a habit of using that. Just to let everybody know, I have started doing my edits for this season. So my 15-minute videos of Conspiracy for this year has started. And here before long, I will be uploading those, but everything is in a process right now. So I've got things that need to be turned into like 8-hour blocks of video, and that's where I'm using a lot of my videos. So um, before I put them onto Rumble, then I usually make an 8-hour block out of all the content that I have, and I put it on my main channel. And then I turn around and I start transferring them over to Rumble, and they'll be coming out. All my uploads for Rumble too is scheduled out until the beginning of the year. They're not on precise days because of the way that the uploading process is on Rumble. It makes it kind of hard to do that. So you're not going to get like one episode running on Monday and then or one series running on Monday and then another on Tuesday. So just to let you know, but they are by what part it is. Like part ones of all my videos will be out on this, and then part two, and then part three, stuff like that. And they'll all be put out at the same time when they're available. So I know that sounded pretty complicated, but I really wish I could say that it's not either. You know, but in order for me to get that many uploads done and ready, it took a little bit of complicated um, methodology, I guess. double checking on all the audio, make sure it sounds good. Yeah. So we have 5 minutes to go, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in another cool song, and I will come back here. I'm gonna take a real quick smoke break, and I will be back with the show. So let me go ahead and put in Celestial Blueprints from Mr. Robot.
They built the pyramids in 20 years, a block every 2 minutes. Hieroglyphs scream their pride, but not a how and what's written. Modern science scratches heads, these structures can't be mimicked. Copper tools, now scholars tripping, logic thinly stretched and twisted. Ran an obelisk, 1,000 tons dragged across the sand. Today's cranes can't lift a fifth, what force moved them by hand? Call the ancients primitive, yo, that's pure delusion. Physicists today need miracles to crack their fusion. The high priest of Kemet mapped the stars with precision, while modern minds stay chained to 3D prison. Land of the lost, esoteric Egypt, hidden with an allegorical crypt. Written in the language of symbolism, advanced knowledge cloaked in simple living. Secrets that rewrite history's episode. As above, so below, the hermetic code. Key of life unlocks the heavenly abode. Conscious matrix, alchemic pyramid ode. The Sphinx wears water scars, a flood from ancient skies. Explosives crack the pyramids, no tombs, just hollow lies. Mummies stolen? Nah, that's ego talk. A weak hypothesis. Truths buried in the stars, encrypted in the myths. Sacred geometry, pagan songs, the roots of Christendom. Pythagoras knelt at their feet, Jesus learned the kingdom. Temples mirror Orion, Aztecs trace the same glow. Megalithic GPS, what's buried below. They split the lotus stem, hid wisdom at the core. Solomon's temple, just a copy of what came before. Land of the lost, esoteric Egypt, hidden wisdom, allegorical crypts. Written in the language of symbolism, advanced knowledge cloaked in simple living. Secrets that rewrite history's episode. As above, so below, the hermetic code. Key of life unlocks the heavenly abode. Conscious matrix, alchemy pyramid ode. Iron to gold, alchemy's flame, they mastered the unseen. Telekinetic levitation, Mars dust in their genes. Critics laugh, aliens but the proof's in the plasma. Why is the Dogon tribe no serious? Was a binary drama. Myths and metaphors, the truth's too bright to hold. Scattered in ruins worldwide, a map etched in gold. They call themselves Negeru, gods with cosmic ships. Gifted fire, math, and law, then dipped beyond the eclipse. Now academia's gatekeepers mock what they can't measure. But the scales of Ma'at weigh soul, not tech or treasure. The Zet Tepi gone when God's walk is king. Left blueprints in Gobekli Tepe and the Nazca line. The unrotated truth burns through the scholar's denial. We're echoes of starlight reclaiming our trial.
When you stare at the sky, feel the ache in your chest. That's ancestral memory. We're all cosmic guests. The pyramids home of him, rising cold and divine. As we pass so low, till the world's realigned.
Land of the lost, esoteric Egypt. Keeps the spiral eternity script. Many language of symbolism. Gods we've been missing. in 20 years, a block every 2 minutes. Hieroglyphs scream their pride, but not a how and what's written. Modern science scratches heads, these structures can't be mimicked. Copper tools, now scholars tripping, logic thinly stretched and twisted. Ran an obelisk, 1,000 tons dragged across the sand. Today's crates can't lift a fifth, what force moved them by hand? Call the ancients primitive, yo, that's pure delusion. Physicists today need miracles to crack their fusion. The high priest of Kemet mapped the stars with precision, while modern minds stay chained to 3D prison. Land of the lost, esoteric Egypt, hidden was an allegorical crypt, written in the language of symbolism, advanced knowledge cloaked in simple living. Secrets that rewrite history's episode, as above so below, the hermetic code. Key of life unlocks the heavenly abode, conscious matrix, alchemic pyramid ode. The sphinx wears water scars, a flood from ancient skies. Explosives crack the pyramids, no tombs, just hollow lies. Money stolen? Nah, that's ego talk, a weak hypothesis. Truths buried in the stars, encrypted in the myths. Sacred geometry, pagan songs, the roots of Christendom. Pythagoras knelt at their feet, Jesus learned the kingdom. Temples mirror Orion, Aztecs trace the same glow. Megalithic GPS, what's buried below. They split the lotus stem, hid wisdom at the core. Solomon's temple, just a copy of what came before. Land of the lost, esoteric Egypt, hidden wisdom, allegorical crypts, written in the language of symbolism, advanced knowledge cloaked in simple living. Secrets that rewrite history's episode, as above so below, the hermetic code. Key of life unlocks the heavenly abode, conscious matrix, alchemy pyramid ode. Iron to gold, alchemy's flame, they mastered the unseen. Telekinetic levitation, Mars dust in their genes. Critics laugh, aliens, but the proof's in the plasma. Why is the Dogon tribe no serious? Was a binary drama. Myths and metaphors, the truth's too bright to hold. Scattered in ruins worldwide, a map etched in gold. They call themselves Negeru, gods with cosmic ships. Gifted fire, math and law, then dipped beyond the eclipse. Now academia's gatekeepers mock what they can't measure. The scales of Ma'at weigh soul, not tech or treasure. The Zek Tepe dawn when gods walked as king. Left blueprints in Gobekli Tepe and the Nazca line. The unrotated truth burns through the scholar's denial. We're echoes of starlight reclaiming our trial.
When you stare at the sky, feel the ache in your chest. That's ancestral memory. We're all cosmic guests. The pyramids home a hymn, rising cold and divine. As above, so below, till the world's realigned.
Land of the lost, esoteric Egypt, truth's a spiral eternity. Language of symbolism, the gods we've been missing.
All right, I am back. So I was a little bit late there on the running, but I got back here. So now it is time for me to get my head on straight so that we can get this going and have a good show. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and start the show. I'll do my countdown and get things freaking get back to, get on with the topic and everything. Okay, so today's going to be a pretty good episode. So let me do my countdown and get ready. Hello everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Conspiracy. Today I am going to go farther in what I was discussing in the last two episodes. The first episode was pretty good. It actually happened or started or this series actually started at the perfect time too, because it had I was starting the season just as Trump released the classified files for the or this for the supposed JFK assassination, or the JFK assassination, the supposed disclosure of JFK is what I really should have said. So what I did is I went through and I brought up some subjects in there that really was never mentioned or discussed before in the Warren Commission. And I also went back through and I kind of did a breakdown on some of the members of the Warren Commission and what their past were that was involved in it. That led me to the second episode where I started talking about World War II and the post World War II reconstruction efforts of Europe. Now, with that being done, I mentioned Jay McCloy, and Jay McCloy was very, very pivotal in that, and he also was involved in the reconstruction of Europe, and some of the things that he was involved in was pretty shady, to be honest with you. Now, with that, I also mentioned some other players that were involved, and that brings us into the third area of what I wanted to be discussing when it comes to all this, and this all has to do with high finance. So now we're going to be hearing about old empires that fell. We're going to hear about new regimes that rose up during the late 1800s, early 1900s. And we're also going to be hearing about high finance and the people who were involved in it. Now, Jekyll Island and everything is involved in it, but there's also other things that are involved that are going on at the same time. And let me also point out to you, what I mentioned here is just a small part of a bigger scene. There was more things that were being played out. Okay, I'm not specifically saying that this was all of it, is what I'm telling you. There's a lot more that's involved in it, but I only have a certain amount of time to where I can make these streams and put out the information that I think is relevant and important. So just keep that in mind when I'm doing this. Okay, so with that being said, I am going to go ahead and get on with the topic. So we're going to first start with a guy who was named James Warburg. The Warburgs are very important. I mentioned them in the previous episode, and I'm going to go further into it. But first, I'm going to start with James Warburg. Now, James Warburg, prominent banker, advisor, and intellectual of the mid-20th century, was deeply involved in the conversation surrounding world governance and global order in the years following World War II. Born into a powerful banking dynasty with German-American roots, Warburg's career intersected with major moments in U.S. foreign policy, economic planning, and post-war international development. Though often discussed in ideological and conspiratorial contexts, Warburg's own documented positions reveal a consistent and principled belief in the need for stronger international institutions and a reduction in absolute national sovereignty to prevent future wars and manage global resources effectively. So he basically wanted stronger international institutions, and then he wanted to reduce national sovereignties. Just so I can put that out there. Now, Warburg's most well-known contributions to this discourse came in the form of his advocacy for a world federal government, a concept he believed could offer lasting peace and stability. Supposedly, that's what the narrative says. Okay, but I'm pretty sure there's nothing that conclusively connects it. But I'm pretty sure that money had more to do with it than lasting peace and stability. And as you listen, you'll hear more of that as we go through. Now, he notably testified before the United States Senate Foreign Relations Committee in 1950, where he stated, "We shall have world government, whether or not we like it. The only question is whether world government will be achieved by consent or by conquest." The statement has since become emblematic of his views and is frequently cited, often without the full context of his broader argument. And I really don't see how you could have a broader argument after making a statement like that. That's pretty right in your face, stating the facts of what he was saying, you know. So, I mean, he did say by consent or by conquest, you know. Now, Warburg supposedly wasn't calling for a top-down authoritarian regime, according to what these people are saying. They were saying that he was wanting a voluntary, democratically constructed international federation that was designed to manage issues that transcended national borders, such as war, disarmament, trade, environmental challenges, things of that nature. So already they're talking about environmental challenges and stuff before World War II ever started. Now, Warburg's model was of what they called a supranational authority, and that would have been structured to perform many of the same functions that national governments were supposedly supposed to perform domestically. That was what was pushed to the public. Now, the authority would be based on a written constitution agreed upon by its member states, with the key caveat being the states would have to surrender certain aspects of their sovereignty, especially in areas like military conflict and economic policy. And this was supposed to be going to the greater collective authority on a world stage. Now, the concept is supposedly supposed to have mirrored the evolution of the United States, where formerly independent colonies had agreed to a binding federal constitution, and that imposed certain uniform policies. But it was also supposed to be preserving autonomy in local governance. Now, this is what they were pushing. This is what they were saying. And if you look around with some of the stuff that's going on today, you tell me if that kind of agenda isn't really taking place behind closed doors. You know, I mean, it just seems a little bit too familiar, if you ask me. Now, this world government would have been composed of several branches, a legislature, which would include representation based both in population and on national identity. And that was to attempt balancing the influence of large and small states. Now, a global executive authority would be responsible for implementing decisions, and they would be responding to international crises and managing the enforcement of laws passed by the legislature. Uh, Perhaps most crucially, a judiciary would oversee compliance and resolve disputes with authority that supersedes national courts. So this international court would actually supersede all of our court systems, no matter what country you were in. Okay, so you would basically have to obey what this national court said above the country that you resided in. So now Warburg believed that such a structure would be critical in eliminating the cause of world wars and preventing arms races that had already devastated humanity in two global conflicts. And again, that is the narrative that has been pushed. Okay, but like I said, as I continue to read on, you'll find out. I mean, you'll be able to make your own judgment on if this stuff is true or not. Okay, now his emphasis on integration among Western nations was not an end goal in itself, but rather a strategy. Warburg saw the democratic and industrialized countries of the West as the most capable of leading the charge towards international unification. That would be the United States, Britain, France, West Germany, and other Western European powers. They would share political traditions and have cooperated militarily and economically through alliances like NATO and institutions like the Marshall Plan. Now, last week we discussed the Marshall Plan, and today that's where I want to kind of go over NATO a little bit. This is an organization that, to me, really kind of sticks out when it comes to what I just read about what Warburg wanted to put together with his plan. Now, Warburg's view alignments. Warburg viewed these alignments as fertile ground for testing a federal model of cooperation. In his view, integration should begin with like-minded nations and gradually extend outward to include the rest of the world. To achieve this, Warburg supported enhanced political coordination among Western nations, including the idea of a shared legislature and eventually a political union similar to what the European Union would later become. On the economic front, though, he endorsed free trade agreements, reduced tariffs, and the creation of shared markets. Now, his model foreshadowed structures like the European Economic Community and later the World Trade Organization, which to me doesn't really help his case. You know what I mean? These are two organizations that are trying to take away countries' sovereignties and impose a universal worldwide law. Albeit with significantly more binding power than they would have ultimately come to possess later. You know what I mean? That's what this view was. His model. Uh, it was it was it would have had a heck of a lot more power than what it did now. Now, Warburg's ideas also included military integration. He favored placing military forces under international command to prevent unilateral actions that could lead to war. He supported the idea of a single defense policy among Western nations, reducing duplication and ensuring that no single state could act aggressively without collective approval. This vision went far beyond the practical limits of NATO at the time, as it would have required nations to hand over a large degree of strategic autonomy. Beyond political and economic frameworks, Warburg believed in building a common culture and ethical foundation among the world's people. He advocated for educational exchanges, international broadcasting, and the promotion of universal human rights. And that I do not really believe. There is nothing that I've found at all whatsoever that shows these people in the Warburg family cared about human rights, much less the education of people, say, in third world countries. Um, the I actually a while back went and checked out what the illiteracy rate is supposed to be on a global scale, and I was pretty amazed. Like if you look at it from back in the 1900s until now, it is bigger in numbers, and it does show that more people are capable of reading and stuff. But percentage-wise, it's not really any better. I mean, it's these people that are from these third world countries aren't being educated; they're just being used as work machines in industrial uh, uh, companies, industrial work sites and stuff. So they're being shifted from being indigenous to being uneducated poor people, basically. That's what I've actually found about it. So he envisioned a global citizenship program and a strengthened sense of common identity to replace nationalist ideologies, which he believed were root causes of division and conflict. Now, Warburg's ideas were not universally embraced, and they often attracted opposition from both the political left and right. Critics on the right feared the loss of national sovereignty and the rise of an unaccountable global bureaucracy. Some on the left were wary of the dominance of Western capitalist powers in shaping the rules of such a system. Moreover, his aristocratic background and banking ties often fueled suspicion, especially during periods of heightened concerns about financial elites influencing political processes. Nonetheless, Warburg's vision found some practical traction in the post war world. The creation of the United Nations, although far more limited in power than what he envisioned, was a step in the direction of international governance. The Bretton Woods system which established institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, reflected a coordinated global economic framework. So Bretton Woods system is the beginning of what would eventually be their attempt at creating a global economic framework. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights laid down principles that would inform future uh, international law. In addition to his role as an advocate for global governance, Warburg was involved in post-war reconstruction efforts in Europe, and through family and professional networks had indirect influence on the implementation of the Marshall Plan. The Warburg family's financial and advisory roles in pre-war and post-war Europe, including connections to German and key banking institutions, gave them considerable insight and leverage in economic planning. While the family profited from international finance, their public activities also aligned with efforts to stabilize Europe and prevent future conflicts. Specific profit figures from their activities are not public, but the Warburg banking legacy continued to play a substantial role in the transatlantic finance well into the second half of the 20th century. The broader context of Warburg's proposal must also be seen against the backdrop of Cold War tensions. The threat of nuclear war, ideological conflict between East and West, and the rapid pace of technological development made the idea of a unified approach to global governance seem both necessary and urgent to some thinkers of the time. While Warburg's world federalism never materialized in its full form, many of its underlying concepts continue to influence international relationships, treaty organizations, and efforts at multilateral diplomacy today. Warburg's ideas also must be placed in the context of changing international norms. His advocacy was not isolated. It echoed the works of other world federalists and statesmen who believed that global cooperation was the only safeguard against annihilation. The devastation of two world wars combined with the advent of nuclear weapons deeply influenced intellectuals and policymakers alike to rethink the structure of international order. Now, I can agree with some of that to an extent, but I would also guess that Warburg was in the process of trying to figure out how to make a profit off of this stuff, because him and his entire family were warmongers who profited off of war. That's how they made their money. And as soon as I get through this part, you'll start about James Warburg. You'll start seeing where I'm coming from with this. I'll go even deeper into all of this so that you guys can understand what I'm talking about. Now, Warburg was one of many who believed that world peace was not only a dream, but it was a necessity. That's according to what the narrative states about James Warburg. They make it out like he was just a peace activist and he wanted peace and that was all he wanted, but a lot of what's being said doesn't really match up. Now, like I said, while James Warburg was not a lone voice in the push for global governance, his prominence, his resources, and connections lent his views greater influence. He was a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and had ties to key figures in the U.S. State Department and economic advisory circles. His proposal His proposals influenced discussions among world federalist organizations and in policy think tanks, although they never became official U.S. policy. Still, Warburg's testimony and writing served to popularize a framework for thinking about how peace might be institutionalized beyond the fragile confines of diplomatic agreements. One area in which his vision indirectly saw implementation through regional integration projects was through regional integration projects. The European Coal and Steel Community, founded in the early 1950s, later expanded into the European Economic Community and eventually the European Union. So now we have the emergence of the European Union. Okay. These institutions reflected many of the principles Warburg championed: economic integration, shared political frameworks, and a bridging legal authority across nations. Though the EU remains a regional body and not a global federation, it has often been cited as a potential model for broader international cooperation. So that, to me, is something that really stands out. What we have here with the EU is actually a guinea pig, a model that they would eventually want to make the world into. So when you're looking at the EU and everything that's involved there, you're looking at something that is actually something they want to make into a global government. And that's something that really does stand out to me whenever I read this. So now, Warburg's emphasis on the moral responsibility of developed nations also carries weight in post-war humanitarian and economic policies. He argued that industrialized democracy had a duty to help build up the developing world, not simply for strategic gain, but to promote shared prosperity and reduce inequality that could lead to conflict. These areas contributed to debates about foreign aid, international development, and economic justice, though their implementation varied widely depending on political leadership and global circumstances. And this is where, when I was mentioning third world countries and the education that they receive, I don't see that as actually being a part of it. Now, I would honestly believe that these people believe that they could use these countries for strategic gain. You know what I mean? While keeping them uneducated and just making them become their cannon fodder when it came to wars and things of that nature. I could see that make them work in the factories and all of the hard jobs that people have to do, the mines and stuff of that nature. In Africa and countries like that, that's what I see being done there. It was more of a strategic game. Now later on, I can go into a little bit more of that because there's a few other things that I want to bring up concerning these organizations that I've just mentioned here. It goes even deeper than what I'm actually reading now, like I said. So this is stuff that you can find on your own too, by the way. There's absolutely nothing here that's classified, hidden from the public. It's right there in your face and you can find it. Now, with that, I'll just continue. Now, as As for his critics, they frequently question not only the feasibility of Warburg's proposals, but also the intentions behind them. His family's banking legacy, particularly the Warburg family's past in Germany and their involvement in global finance, was sometimes used to paint him as a symbol of elite overreach or hidden influence. This framing intensified during periods of political popularization and during the rise of anti-global sentiments. While these critics rarely address the actual content of Warburg's plan, they nevertheless shaped public perception and limited broader acceptance of these ideas. One of the core challenges facing Warburg's vision was the issue of democratic legitimacy. How could a global government be accountable to citizens when most of the world did not share the same democratic norms or institutions? Would smaller nations truly have a voice, or would power be concentrated in the hands of wealthy states? These questions remained unresolved and continued to animate debates about global government and continue to animate debates about global governance today. Warburg acknowledged such concerns and proposed mechanisms for proportional representation and legal guarantees to protect national identities and minorities' rights. Nonetheless, implementing such safeguards on a global scale has proven enormously complex. Despite these obstacles, Warburg never abandoned his vision. He continued despite these obstacles. And he was supposed to advocate for international integration well into the 1950s and 1960s. His legacy lives on in various institutions, academic discussions, and activist movements dedicated to world federalism and global democracy. While world governments, as he imagined it, remains elusive, the institutions and treaties built in the post-war era reflect at least a partial embrace of his philosophy that peace and security depends on rules, cooperation, and shared responsibility. And for me personally, no, I do not agree with anything that this man represented. The one thing I am 100% about is 100% against is world governance. So, I mean, with me, that's the one thing that I have to say about that. Now, with that, I'm going to go ahead and kind of dive more into this thing about becoming a interdependent world and for federal governance. Now, unlike some other globalists of his time, Warburg didn't cloak his ambition in secrecy or diplomatic language. He was often really forthright about the challenges and trade-offs involved in world federalism, including the surrender of certain national prerogatives and the elevation of global priority over parochial interests. This openness has led to a long-lasting impact on international thought, even if his full vision has not come to pass. His call for greater integration. That's what I was talking about, this whole term integration. His call for greater integration among Western nations was not merely strategic, but based on a belief of shared cultural, economic, and political values. This alignment, he argued, made Western democracies the most viable starting point for a federal global system. Those subsequent events, including the Cold War, the rise of China, and the fragmentation of international norms, have complicated the prospect for such a union. Warburg's proposal remains a benchmark in discussions of supranational governance and the search for lasting peace. In today's world of rising nationalism, political polarization, and renewed geopolitical competition, Warburg's vision may seem idealistic or even outdated. Yet the core issues he sought to address, global conflict, environmental degradation, economic inequality, and nuclear proliferation, remain as urgent now as they were in his time. And the thing that gets me is, like I said before, now, I mean, they're even back then talking about environmental degradation, you know. So that is something that I've always been wanting to get into, because I know I've heard older stories about back in the 1940s where they were pushing environmental climate change and stuff like that. Um, and I haven't really been able to find the older ones because it seems like they've just disappeared, you know. But I remember um, seeing scenes where I believe that the guy was called Dr. Seuss. It wasn't the guy that did Cat in the Hat, but it was another guy. He was real big in environmental uh, climate change, and he was the one who started the whole thing about the ice caps melting and stuff back in the 1940s, I believe it was. So I mean, there's a lot of that content that I at one time went back and tried to find, and I couldn't find it. It just happened to visit or disappear, you know. For some reason, everybody wants us to believe that all of this started on Earth Day, you know, and that's just not true. Now, let me get started with Paul Moritz Warburg now, because it just makes me sick listening to the stuff that I'm reading. I hate that. I hate the fact that that stuff's coming out of my mouth. So Paul Warburg was born in 1868 in Hamburg, Germany, and he became a significant figure in the development of the American financial system due to his involvement in the creation of the Federal Reserve. His background in European banking and experience as a partner at Kuhn, Loeb and Co., a major investment bank in the United States, gave him influence in promoting banking reforms. Warburg's actions, including his push for central banking, coincided with efforts to increase control over monetary policy, though some have questioned the motivations and the impacts of such reforms. Coming from a prominent banking family, Warburg was familiar with centralized European banking systems, particularly the German Reichsbank. After relocating to the United States in the early 1900s, he critiqued the decentralized nature of American banking. Following the Panic of 1907, He used the opportunity to advocate for the creation of a central bank. He published papers and gave talks promoting a reserve system, drawing parallels with the European models. While some viewed these ideas as necessary modernization, others saw them as a means to consolidate power among banking elites. Although initially met with skepticism, Warburg's ideas gained support among key politicians and businessmen. The Federal Reserve Act of 1913 was passed, creating a central bank. Warburg was appointed to the first Federal Reserve Board in 1914. In taking this position, he formally resigned from his private business roles to reduce perception of conflict of interest. He stepped down as a partner of Kuhn, Loeb and Company and resigned from positions at the National Bank of the Republic and Wells Fargo and Company. Jacob Schiff, Warburg's brother-in-law and fellow partner at Kuhn Loeb, assumed several of Warburg's responsibilities. Schiff also served on the board of Wells Fargo's and continued to lead Kuhn, Loeb and Co. Schiff's rise coincided with major political and financial shifts in the early 20th century. While some credit him with strategic leadership and philanthropy, or however you say it, others argue that his role in international finance and broader implications that served private interests. Others argue that his role in international finance had broader implications that served private interests. Felix Warburg, Paul Warburg's brother, took on greater responsibilities at Kuhn Loeb during this period too. Like his brother, Felix held significant influence in financial and philanthropic circles. The Warburg family's presence in major financial institutions allowed them to maintain influence even as Paul entered public service. While on the Federal Reserve Board, Paul Warburg contributed to the development of central banking policy and regional banking systems. This included actions during World War I that supported the U.S. economy. Warburg's understanding of international finance was considered valuable, though questions remain about the long-term impacts of the policies he helped implement. After his term on the Federal Reserve Board, Warburg continued in finance, including establishing the American Acceptance Council in 1990 and serving as chairman of the International Acceptance Bank in New York. His post-Fed activities continued to shape financial policies, often without the visibility of his earlier public role. The transfer of duties from Warburg to Schiff and others at Kuhn Loeb demonstrates how financial influence was maintained across institutions. Schiff remained a significant figure in American finance, with involvement in foreign affairs and support for overseas governments and movements, raising concerns among critics about the alignment of private interest and public outcomes. Warburg's critics accuse him of advancing reforms that disproportionately benefited large banks and undermined public oversights. Allegations of self-interest and manipulation of financial systems followed him throughout his career. Some have speculated about his connection to financial crises and questioned whether his advocacy for reform served broader public interest or entrenched private control. Jacob Schiff's investments, particularly in international conflicts such as the Russo-Japanese War, also sparked debate. Schiff's financial backing of Japan during its war with Russia was seen by some as politically motivated and as evidence of how financial institutes could influence global events. Though Schiff claimed moral reasons for his decision, the financial and geopolitical benefits cannot be overlooked. The Warburg and Schiff families' involvement in shaping the U.S. and global financial systems contributed to structural changes with lasting impacts. These changes centralized power and introduced new financial mechanisms that expanded the influence of private banks. While some historians interpret these developments as necessary modernization, others argue that they reflect a consolidation of elite power under the guise of reform. Paul Warburg's theories on central banking promoted a stronger institutional framework, but they also facilitated increased control by unelected financial authorities. His support for a central bank included the belief that such an institution should operate independently of public opinion and electoral oversight, a view that remains controversial. The Federal Reserve's current structure reflects many of Warburg's ideas, and it continues to face scrutiny for its perceived lack of transparency and public accountability. In the early 20th century was marked by significant financial upheavals, including recurring panics and economic instability. The creation of the Federal Reserve, driven in part by Warburg, was a response to these conditions. Now, me personally, I find that could possibly be untrue. There's a good chance that these people actually caused a lot of these bank runs, just so they could actually enforce these laws and create the Federal Reserve, federal banking and stuff. That's just my take on it. It just, when you read this stuff enough over and over again, it's there. You know what I mean? So that's something that really sticks out to me. Now, however, questions remain about whether these crises were exacerbated or even manipulated by those advocating for centralization. Jacob Schiff's continued influence at Kuhn, Loeb, and other institutes, including Wells Fargo's, reinforces the dominance of a small group of financiers in American economic life. Critics have pointed out that such concentration of influence was detrimental to democratic principles and led to decisions driven by financial self-interest rather than by public welfare. The roles of Paul Warburg and Jacob Schiff in shaping the modern American financial system are complex. They were influential in the creation and leadership of institutions that still impact financial finance or global finance today. However, their motivation, the outcomes of their actions, and the power they wielded remain subjects of critical historical debate. The consolidation of financial authority that followed their rise has been both praised for stability and criticized for entrenching elite control over economic policy. Now, after that, I want to also shift over to Max Warburg. Now, this is where a lot of things kind of start uh, making a little bit more sense too when it comes to profiting off of war. And I also see them breaking up into two factions. You take this side, I take this side, and we meet in the middle and make a big pot of uh, big profit off of it. You know what I mean? And we share the gold, the big pot of gold, kind of thing. So with that, I'm going to start with, or I'm going to start talking about Max Warburg. Now, Max Warburg, it was a prominent figure in the early 20th century European in European finance. He played a significant role as a financial advisor to the German government during World War One. As head of M.M. Warburg and Company, a major Hamburg-based bank with deep international connections, Max was regarded as one of Germany's most influential bankers. His activities during the war, along with the global position of the Warburg family, highlight a complex intersection of financial, political, and transnational power that defined the wartime and post-war economic landscapes. Born in 1867 to the powerful Warburg banking family, Max inherited not only the family business but also a legacy of financial involvement that that extended across Europe and into the United States. By the outbreak of World War One in 1914, Max Warburg had already cemented himself as a trusted advisor to key figures in the German Empire, including Kaiser Wilhelm II. He was a member of the Reichsbank Advisory Board and often called upon to provide counsel to Germany's monetary and economic strategies. As Germany became increasingly isolated from international financial markets due to the British naval blockade and diplomatic pressure from the Allies, Warburg's experience and connections in neutral countries became even more vital. His expertise in international banking and knowledge of capital flows allowed him to facilitate indirect economic transactions and attempt to circumvent some of the economic constraints placed upon the Central Powers. These efforts, however, were limited by the geopolitical realities of the war, as Germany's access to international credit and trade diminished. One of the most controversial aspects of Max Warburg's legacy stems from the simultaneous rise of his brother Paul Warburg in the United States. Paul Warburg was a key architect of the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 and served in the initial Federal Reserve Board, on the initial Federal Reserve Board. While Paul had resigned from his positions at Kuhn Loeb and Company in Wells Fargo to join the board, concerns persisted over potential conflict of interest. During World War I, while Max advised the German Empire, Paul was advising the U.S. government as a top monetary authority. This transatlantic split in allegiances within the Warburg family has fueled persistent debate and speculation. Critics have long questioned whether these dual roles created an unseen channel of financial communication or influence between opposing sides. While no evidence has emerged proving coordination between the brothers during the war, the situation raised eyebrows in both Europe and America. The perception of elite banking families transcending national boundaries in a time of global conflict contributed to broader anxieties about the concentration of financial power and the role of international bankers in world events. Mark Warburg's influence extended beyond his advisory role. He was instrumental in directing funds and advising on war bond campaigns within Germany. His position on various corporate and banking boards gave him a central role in the strategic decisions about the mobilization of resources for the war effort. He also had to manage the effects of war on German industry, overseeing efforts to maintain economic stability in the face of growing shortages and inflation. After the war, Max Warburg continued to wield influence during the period of reconstruction and financial stabilization. He was a delegate to the Versailles Peace Conference in 1919, representing German financial interests. Warburg opposed some of the harsh reparations imposed on Germany and worked to negotiate more favorable terms for the nation's recovery. He later played a role in the establishment of the German Central Bank, the Reichsbank, under the new post-war economic framework. The Warburg family's financial involvement during the interwar years further embedded them in the transnational financial architecture that would shape Europe in the lead up to World War II. While Max Warburg's business continued in Germany, the rise of the Nazi regime in the 1930s forced the family to divest and flee the country. Despite being a decorated German patriot who had supported the state during World War I, Max Warburg, like many German Jews, found himself stripped of his position and persecuted under Nazi racial laws. He eventually immigrated to the United States, where other members of the Warburg family had already established themselves. And even though it's mentioned here that he was persecuted by the Nazis, you need to also remember that he was a World War I war criminal. Okay, this man was responsible for chemicals that had been freaking dropped on freaking Allied soldiers. And he was literally able to walk into the United States and get citizenship because of the amount of money that was in his pocket. Okay? Now, don't get me wrong, there was a lot of horrible things that happened in World War II, but nobody ever looks at World War I where, there's a reason why chemical warfare is abolished. Okay? And World War I was the reason for that. A lot of people died in that war too. And this man was involved in the financing of those chemical weapons that eventually killed Allied troops. And he was just allowed right into the United States because of his influence and his money. Now, the perception of the Warburgs as figures operating above natural politics has led to their inclusion in many critiques of early 20th century global finance. The notion that such families could wield influence in multiple national arenas simultaneously during a time of unprecedented warfare and political upheaval fostered suspicions that these financial networks prioritize personal or institutional interests over the interests of any one nation. These concerns are compounded by the fact that private banking families like the Warburgs often maintain discretion in their dealings, rarely publicizing their influence or decisions. In Germany, Max Warburg's role as financial advisor was both celebrated and criticized. His expertise was recognized by many in the establishment, yet nationalists and far-right factions frequently attacked him, especially in the years following the war. These criticisms intensified with the rise of anti-Semitic ideologies, which painted Jewish bankers as the architects of German defeat and economic decline. Max Warburg's association with international finance made him an easy target for conspiracy theories that sought to attribute Germany's loss in the war and subsequent suffering to betrayal from within. In the United States, Paul Warburg's position was not immune to scrutiny either. Despite his former renunciation of private business ties upon joining the Federal Reserve Board, questions persisted about whether his family's transnational connections influenced U.S. monetary policy. Paul had advocated for a central bank long before the war, arguing that financial panics like those in 1907 demonstrated the need for more effective control over the banking systems. However, critics viewed the creation of the Federal Reserve as a mechanism that placed immense economic power in the hands of unelected financiers. Both Max and Paul Warburg operated at the intersection of public policy and private finance, a space where influence is hard to measure and accountability is often diffused. Their simultaneous involvement in the financial affairs of two opposing powers during a world war is perhaps the most vivid illustration of the dual loyalties and overlapping interests that defined international finance in the early 20th century. Their legacies, whether interpreted as examples of visionary economic leadership or elite control of global systems, remain central to the history of modern banking. The Warburgs were also involved in post-war efforts to reshape Europe economically. The family's expertise and capital were welcomed in various projects that sought to stabilize currencies, rebuild industrial capacities, and reestablish international trade. While these efforts were framed as part of a broader vision for economic cooperation and peace, they also provide opportunities for consolidating financial influence across borders. The participation of private banking families in the reconstruction of Europe has led some to question the extent to which these projects serve public welfare versus financial interests. Max Warburg's last years were marked by the rapid changes occurring in Germany under the Nazi regime. Despite his long-standing service to the German state, he was forced to sell his bank under duress and leave the country. This expulsion of Jewish financiers during the Nazi era not only marked a tragic end to Warburg's career in Germany, but also underscored the dangers of relying on personal influence and informal networks in a time of political extremism. While Max and Paul Warburg never publicly coordinated during World War I, the fact that they had such prominent position on opposing sides of the global conflict highlights the unique position of transnational banking families. Their dual roles illustrate how financial networks could straddle political divides, functioning with relative independence from national governments. Whether this influence was used for stabilization or exploitation remains a point of contention among historians and researchers. In hindsight, the Warburgs' contributions to global finance cannot be separated from the political realities of their time. Their rise to power occurred during a period of intense economic volatility and global conflict. Their activities were shaped by both opportunity and necessity. The structural changes they helped implement, from the founding of the Federal Reserve to the financial mobilization of Germany during World War I, continue to affect the global economy today. The Warburg family's history is emblematic of a broader phenomenon in early 20th century finance: the growing influence of private financial dynasties in shaping public policy and international relations. Max Warburg's role in advising the German Empire, particularly during a time of immense global conflict, must be viewed not only in terms of individual decision-making, but also as a part of a larger system in which financial expertise and political power become increasingly intertwined. This intersection remains a key feature in modern economic systems and continues to provoke questions about transparency, accountability, and the true nature of financial power in a world defined by both cooperation and conflict. Now, the Russo-Japanese War is a war that took place between 1904 and 1905, and it's marked a significant turning point in both East Asian and global history. But the financial currents driving this conflict often remain underexplored. Central to this financial theater were key Western banking families and institutions, most notably Jacob Schiff, the Rothschild family, and the Warburgs. These names, synonymous with elite banking, played roles that would ripple beyond the war itself, impacting the collapse of the Russian Empire and contributing to the emergence of both militarized Japan and eventually revolutionary currents in Russia. Jacob Schiff, a German-born Jewish banker who immigrated to the United States, became a principal figure at Kuhn Loeb and Company, one of the most powerful investment banks in America. Schiff had trained in the financial traditions of Frankfurt, a city where the Rothschild banking dynasty had established one of its foundational strongholds. This European education had installed in Schiff a deep understanding of international finance and geopolitics, and his ties to the Rothschilds and the Warburg family of Hamburg further extended his influence across continents. As tensions escalated between Japan and Russia at the dawn of the 20th century, Schiff emerged as a vital supporter of Japan. His motivations were multifaceted. one reason was ideological. He harbored a profound opposition to the Russian Empire's policies towards its Jewish population, which include pogroms and institutionalized discrimination. Yet, strategic and financial aspects of his decision were just as significant. Schiff believed that a victorious Japan could alter the balance of power in East Asia and challenge the autocratic regime in Russia. To support Japan, Schiff arranged for massive loans amounting to over 200 million in today's money to be issued to the Japanese government through Kuhn Loeb and Co. These funds were instrumental in Japan's ability to sustain its war effort against the numerically and materially superior Russian Empire. Schiff's move was revolutionary. It marked one of the first times a major Western financier had backed an Asian nation against a European power. It also demonstrated the emerging power of global capital independent of national borders. At the same time, Schiff's financial support of Japan had broader implications. The funds he helped secure were used to modernize Japan's infrastructure, including its navy and army. This support allowed Japan to project military power far beyond its borders, culminating in the stocking victory over Russian forces at Port Arthur and Tsushima. These victories were not only strategic but psychological, shattering the illusion of European military invincibility and inspiring colonial and nationalist movements across Asia. In addition to Schiff's contributions, the Rothschild banking house in London and Paris played important, albeit more indirect roles. Though they did not openly support the Japanese war efforts in the same overt way that Schiff did, Rothschild-affiliated institutions helped manage the complex web of international bonds and credit relations that underpinned the war economies. The Rothschilds, with their deep roots in sovereign debt markets and their close relationship with European governments, had a long-standing interest in the political stability of the continent. However, their involvement in managing Japanese bond issuances in London, facilitated through allied banks like Barings and N.M. Rothschild and Sons, suggests they saw a rising Japan as a valuable geopolitical player. The Warburg family, another powerful German Jewish banking dynasty, added a third dimension to this financial equation. Max Warburg in Germany and Paul Warburg in the United States maintained extensive networks in both European and American financial circles. While there is limited public documentation of direct Warburg financing for the Japanese war effort, the family's connections with Schiff and their stake in institutions like Deutsche Bank and other industrial financial concerns created a shared ecosystem of influence. The Warburgs were known for their interests in global economic systems and were instrumental in founding the U.S. Federal Reserve in later years. Their ideological and practical commitments to financial centralization and internationalism were in harmony with the kind of cross-border support seen in the Russo-Japanese War. Financial institutes associated with the Rothschilds and Warburgs also played roles in Japan's broader industrialization, especially before and after the war. Companies like Krupp, a German industrial powerhouse in which Deutsche Bank was heavily invested, provided weapons and military technology to Japan. Krupp artillery and naval gun designs were widely adopted by the Japanese military, helping the empire to construct a modern fighting force capable of standing against the Russians. Although these industrial deals were conducted through intermediaries and not always directly financed by the Warburgs or Rothschilds, the capital pipelines and banking expertise necessary to execute them were managed by these transnational families. The Japanese modernization project, which included building railroads, ports, shipyards, and telegraph lines, was further supported by foreign advisors and contractors. British, German, French, and American engineers and financial experts worked with Japanese officials to develop the industrial base required for a modern economy and military. These foreign experts were often sourced through Western firms with Rothschild or Warburg affiliations. Even though these connections may have been several degrees removed, they formed a global matrix of capital and expertise with common objectives: economic expansion, geopolitical influence, and profit. Schiff's funding of the Japanese war effort had significant consequences for Russia. The defeat at the hands of Japan triggered political unrest throughout the Russian Empire. The loss was not only humiliating but economically devastating, leading to the 1905 Russian Revolution. This uprising, though ultimately suppressed, marked the beginning of the end for the Romanov dynasty. Revolutionary ideas gained traction, and dissatisfaction with autocratic rule became widespread. Though Schiff did not fund revolutionary groups directly, his financial support for Japan arguably helped create the conditions that weakened the Russian regime and set the stage for the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917. Some historians and commentators have speculated whether Schiff's actions were intentionally aimed to destabilize Russia to promote revolutionary change. While there is no definitive proof to support this claim, the impact of his financial interventions cannot be dismissed. Schiff himself made no secret of his disdain for Tsarist Russia, and his support for Japan aligned with both his ideological convictions and business interests. In the broader context, the financial network that linked Schiff, the Rothschilds, and the Warburgs illustrate how global capital was increasingly divorced from national allegiances. These bankers operated in a world where geopolitical calculations were filtered through the lens of finance, investment, and long-term strategic planning. Their decisions had ramifications that extended far beyond profit margins, influencing the outcome of wars, revolutions, and the rise and fall of empires. In summary, the roles played by Jacob Schiff, the Rothschild banking dynasty, and the Warburg family in the Russo-Japanese War reveal a hidden layer of 20th century history where financial power quietly steered the course of global events. Schiff's explicit support for Japan set a precedent for cross-continental financial alliances, while the Rothschilds and Warburg networks provided the infrastructure and capital that sustained such endeavors. Their involvement, whether direct or indirect, had profound consequences: the weakening of Tsarist Russia, the emboldening of Japan as a modern military power, and the emergence of new revolutionary movements that would reshape the global order in the decades to come. Now, this is the part where I also mentioned that because of all the stuff that I had just now read concerning Japan and the Russo-Japan War, this stuff eventually allowed for Japan to build up a military and an industrialized complex strong enough to where they could go to war with us, and they were eventually able to have the means to bomb Pearl Harbor. And this was all because of this war and because of the support that was given to them by these corporations and financial institutes that wanted to industrialize Japan and make it into what it eventually became. So that is the end of my reading, and I'm going to go and check out everything, see if anybody came in and made any kind of comments. If they haven't, then I am going to end this stream. I wanted to put this together for quite some time. I had all my notes originally back whenever Facebook had Facebook notes, and soon they deleted all of those, and that really pissed me off. But as time went by, I kept telling myself over and over again, I'm going to come back to this and get this out on stream, and finally I was able to get around to doing it. This is a very, very interesting story, and if you guys haven't done research on it, you really should, because this is a part of history that you're not going to hear about in textbooks. Okay, this is really, really interesting content that you're not going to learn about in school. Just put it to you that way. And Razram showed up for chat in YouTube. He says, "Good evening, everyone. I'm sorry for being late." Hey, man, you're never late. Okay, we'll welcome you into the chat anytime. I'm glad to see you again, though, actually, because I kind of didn't understand it, what your thoughts were the last time you was in when we were doing Cosmic Weave, and I didn't want. I was kind of worried that you left with the wrong idea of where I was going with that topic, but we did an episode last night. If you want to catch it, and it kind of explains it a little bit more in detail, because I had two other people that were on the stream with me, and we just had a 3-hour conversation about what I was making the Cosmic Weave about, kind of exploring it. So if you want to check that out, it'll be a little bit more helpful on that topic. But this is conspiracy theory, so I'm going to stay on topic, hopefully, which I have a hard time doing sometimes. So I better shut my mouth when it comes to the Cosmic Weave, or I'll start talking all that stuff. If you guys did like the stream, please like, subscribe, share, make comments. Make comments, seriously. I do enjoy having conversations with you guys. So if you have any feedback, or if you want to make any comments about what was discussed in the stream, make them, and I will see you guys later. I hope you have a good day. For those who are Catholic, belated happy or Good Friday. I didn't realize it was Good Friday until yesterday, so that was only because my friend Tan Hai Tran told me it was Friday, or it was Good Friday, and he's Catholic. So happy belated Good Friday to all you guys, and I will talk to you later. I hope you have a good night, morning, afternoon, whatever it is today for you. Um, and with that, I will go ahead and end the stream. Thanks for watching.